Hello and welcome to Ozark Writers Workshop 2020. Thank you again for joining us for our Finding Your Audience panel. This workshop is brought to you by Ozark Book Authority, a local nonprofit organization with the mission to improve literacy in Northwest Arkansas through fundraising, outreach, and regular literary programming. You can find out more about us at www.ozarkbookauthority.com. So first things first, we'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and we can start with Russell.
Hello, my name is Russell Gayer. I'm a humor writer. I'm the author of two books. The first one is called The Perils of Heavy Thinking, and it's a collection of short stories, or a bathroom companion, as some people like to refer to it. My second book was called One Idiot Short of a Village, and it contains 12 short stories and a novella. And I'm currently writing a book called, and this will be a novel, Criminal Mimes, and it's a romantic comedy. So I'm hoping to reach a wider audience with this. And my daughter also has some experience writing screenplays, so I think I may try to adapt it to a screenplay and see if it won't sell better that way.
Very cool. Adriel, what about you? Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Adriel Wiggins. I am a virtual assistant and continuity editor for independent authors and small publishers. So I do the business back end of all the author stuff.
And Tamara?
Hi, I'm Tamara Hart Heiner. I'm primarily a children's author. I write books for children ages 6 to 18. I am most known for the Cassandra Jones series. It is my best-selling series, and it's got 5 books out, 6 coming out in October. I do write some romance. I have 1 nonfiction, but mostly stick to the children's fiction.
Oh, very cool. We all have very different genres and backgrounds here. So going right into the questions, for the most basic question about, finding your audience. How do you decide who your target audience for a book is? Russell, we can start with you.
Okay. When I finished my first book, or maybe before I did, the publisher asked me, who's your target audience? And quite frankly, I didn't have a clue. But I found out, over time, you discover that pretty soon. For one thing, when you write humor, you have a pretty narrow audience. When you start Googling genres of books, humor is so far down that you have to turn the page 3 or 4 times just to find it. I have discovered that typically the age group that will buy humor is probably somewhere between 45 and 70. It's kind of in that range. It's people who maybe sci-fi is a little too far out there for them. Maybe they're not really into action type books. And it's kind of a difficult field to market in, but I've discovered that's the people that like my stuff. And I've had my best success when I could really get before them in person. I've also found that, people telling other people, word of mouth is still the best way to sell almost anything. Get a recommendation from folks.
So when your publisher asked you that and you didn't have an answer, how did you figure it out?
Trial and error, basically.
Yeah.
Because, what I discovered is everybody likes humor, but not a whole lot of people are willing to pay for it. A book is quite an investment of time. When you buy a book, you're going to spend 10 to 12 hours reading it. So people make decisions typically based on the genre they like to read. Now, there are several successful humor writers. Dave Barry comes to mind instantly. He's probably one of my favorites. And I also like David Sedaris very well, but they're 2 totally different styles. Both gained notoriety, though, through other ventures. David got his through PBS, kind of got his start and launched his career. And of course, he was also published in New Yorker and things like that. And then, of course, Dave Barry wrote for years and years for newspapers and actually won a Pulitzer Prize. And I kind of follow his vein of humor a little bit more. But so I look for the people that typically the same folks that buy books from those authors are candidates for me to market to.
Yeah, that seems like a really good starting point. And then trial and error, like you said.
Yeah.
So Adriel, you have kind of a different perspective on this, but like as an author assistant and continuity editor, how would you maybe either help an author, or how would you determine who the target audience for a book is?
Well, there's the broad strokes that you know a book is fantasy versus mystery, so you're looking for fantasy versus mystery readers. But then even once you get into those, you can even more narrow down. It's not the generic mystery reader. Instead, you're also looking at cozy mystery readers tend to be a little bit older than suspense mystery readers tend to be a little bit younger. So then you can separate out, well, what subgenre am I writing in, am I looking at? And that helps you, again, narrow down some generalizations. But then, like Russell was saying, if you can look at successful authors in your overall genre, but also in your specific subgenre, then a lot of times focusing ads that connect to them, readers helps a lot. And then after that, it's all about polling them and finding out more about them once you've got a pretty good audience under you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tamara, how about you? How do you decide who your target audience is?
Well, for children's fiction, it's a little bit easier to figure out because you're a little bit limited. It's mostly narrowing it down to what age group am I trying to target. There's a general rule of thumb that children like to read up. So if I'm targeting 6-year-olds, my main characters are going to be 8, and so forth. If I'm targeting 13-year-olds, my main characters are going to be 15. So with that in mind, if I'm writing a book that's paranormal suspense, but I want it to be read by 13-year-old children, I have to keep them in mind, even if there are going to be more what you would consider more violent scenes or more gruesome scenes. I have to tone it down so that it has more of that PG rating to it, more of that feel to it, because that's my target audience. And so I have to keep in mind who I'm trying to talk to as I'm writing the book. And because I enjoy reading young adult books so much, there was never any question in my mind that I was going to write for young adults. I never even wanted to write for adults to try to tap into that. And so it's a lot easier as a children's author, I think, to figure out my target audience is mostly just what age group am I going for. And of course, if they're younger kids, then a lot of boys won't read books that have a girl main character. So if I'm targeting boys, I have to make sure there's going to be a boy main character in there and just things like that.
Do you find it, because I know like he's talking about like having to keep those particular readers in mind, but also having to, do you find it like limiting it all in a way? Like, trying to figure out how to word this.
No, limiting was the word that I thought of as well. It's not that it limits me, but it means I have to be more creative in how I share it. So it definitely requires me to think things through a lot more. And you can still be quite graphic without being gory. And I just have to keep that in mind. But a lot of younger kids read really far up. Even my own daughter, she's only 9, but she's read almost everything I've written. And there are many books of mine she's picked up that I just kind of cringe and I bite my nails a little. I'm like, you're not my target audience for that. But because she's capable of reading up, she will read it. And so I have to really keep that in mind when I'm writing, because I write a lot about major social issues like eating disorders and sex trafficking and teen pregnancy and a lot of things that I don't necessarily intend to be read by 9 and 10-year-olds. But knowing that there are kids that are going to pick it up like that, I try not to make it too sensational, and I always include like there's a consequence to these actions so that it can be a learning experience even for young children.
I think that's like, those are some really good points, kind of like because a lot of, especially with young adult, there's a lot of adult readers who read young adult, and then there's also, like you said, middle grade readers who read up, and you kind of find yourself inadvertently writing for like 3 separate age groups at the same time. So it seems like a really difficult thing to juggle. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's like you are writing for a specific age group. And so you have to keep those people in mind more than you do the adults who are reading. I don't want to say reading down, but, reading the young adult.
Yes. Well, if they're like me, I like reading young adult because it moves very quickly. It usually has a smaller plot line. You don't have 5 or 6 different threads going on like you do in science fiction or fantasy. And the love is very passionate because they're teenagers. And so I imagine that if there are adults reading my books, it's because they want those same kinds of things, which I can gladly give them while still making it age appropriate.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a really interesting dilemma or challenge for young adult authors specifically. So you know who your target audience is. How do you reach them? How do you find them? How do you get your book in front of them? And we can start with Russell again.
Okay. Well, what I've done is I've done a lot of blogging. Several years ago, I joined a group called Friday Flash Fictioneers. And once a week, there's a photo posted, and everyone that participates writes a 100-word flash fiction story. And it's kind of funny to go read all different stories because so many of them are so dark. And I always naturally write a funny one because my website says, "What's so funny?" And I also, at the start of each one, I write a little intro. And I often get comments that people think the intro is funnier than the story. And the reason that is I look for things that I try to connect with people on a common plane, shared experiences, something like that. Like one of my little posts was about how to eat an animal cracker. How do you eat an animal cracker? Do you bite the head off first, or do you eat the legs off? And the responses I got from that was hilarious. And then the next week I wrote about the 2 types of napkin users. You have folders and you have wadders. And notice this when you go to a restaurant sometime. Just look around the tables and you'll see both kinds of people there. And so at the end of the blog post, I would ask, how do you use a napkin? Or how do you eat an animal cracker? And I would get a whole stream of answers. And typically, kind of build a relationship with these people and let them become brand advocates for me and spread the word. One lady actually reblogged several of my posts, and she always puts a little line in there, look for Russell's books when you get to the website and yada, yada, yada. And I've sold several books as a result of that. So that's one way that I connect with my readers and become friends with them and have them use word of mouth to publicize me.
I think that's really cool, that you're able to build an audience that way, like through your blog, and kind of having those conversations. They start from a silly, from humor, but you get people connecting to what you're saying, and especially I found that when you ask people to contribute their own opinions, you more often get engagement like that. And I think that's fantastic.
Yes, you sure do.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic that you've been able to do that. Blogging is not easy.
No, it's not. But it's the real reward comes when people tell you that, I read your piece today and I was feeling down, and this lifted me up and made me smile for maybe the first time in a week. And especially with all the stuff going around right now, people need a little humor. They need a break from news about COVID or all kinds of bad things that are going on in the world. And this gives them, for just a few seconds, they can push that aside and have a laugh.
Yeah, your little happy place on the internet.
Yeah.
So, Adriel, as an author assistant, how would you help, say, an author find their target audience? Like, they know who they want to read their books. How do they find them?
Well, interestingly, one of the first things I would see is go join a group. Like Russell said, he had a group of flagship flash fiction writers, and you and I met on Google Plus in an author group where we just beta read for each other. But the more groups like that you join, especially if they're genre specific, then you're building a relationship with other authors, which you can then leverage to become a relationship with more readers. Because because you've commented on each other's flash fiction, or because you've beta read for them, or because you've been talking to them every day on the Kindle boards or whatever, then when you go to them and you say, hey, could you do newsletter swap for me? Would you announce my new book coming out? Then they're a lot more eager to do that. And then at that point, then you've just increased some of your readers because suddenly you've stolen some of them. They'll remain faithful to that author as well, but now you've got readers that already like that genre because you've gone to the other authors in that genre. So one of the biggest things I do, I have what I call the massive author reference sheet. And anytime I meet any author, work with them at all professionally or not, I just read their books, whatever, I add them to the sheet, and I add exactly what genres and subgenres they write, what heat level or rating they are, whether it's violence or sex or whatever. And then I keep notes on them. And then anytime that they do any newsletter swap with any of my authors, or they do multi-author event, or they're in an anthology with a publisher I know, or anything like that, then I keep track of that. So I know that those authors are more willing to do more stuff like that in the future. So an author can say, hey, I've got this release coming up. I want to do 100 newsletter swaps. Well, I've got 1,000 names in your genre that we can ask. And I think these 100 are most likely to actually do that. So that's one of the things that I do, just constantly keeping that updated and going, that it makes it a lot easier to search for the right people. And then the author can go through and pick out the ones that they've already built a relationship with. So then it's even more likely that they'll say yes.
I think that's a really good point, talking about, finding those groups. Like you said, we met on Google Plus back when, Google Plus was a thing. RIP Google Plus. And, yeah, we were like, I mean, there's probably, 100 people that were all really engaged with each other's posts, and a lot of us were all starting out self-publishing books in similar genres and stuff like that. So there was a lot of shared promotion of that kind of thing. And I've met people that I'm still friends with, obviously Adriel. And then one of my best friends, we met through Google Plus, and we're still friends to this day. And I have lots of readers who started out as Google Plus friends. So I think that's a really good point. And like you said, the Kindle boards, or even NaNoWriMo, or even Twitter, certain Twitter hashtags, you can find your people there and possibly share audiences in a way, and expand your own. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a very good point. So Tamara,
I've also earlier we were talking about tribes, and which brings up a point that one of my strongest tribes is actually a group of authors that I met at an author conference. That particular author conference is really good about being inclusive and encouraging each other. So that's a whole group of authors, and we write astonishingly different genres. But even within that, then you've got your support group as well as people that you can cross promote with, and that's always helpful on the bad days.
So Tamara, what about you? How do you reach your target audience, especially being young adults and children? How do you get your work in front of them?
Well, first I'll talk about the gatekeepers, because that's what everyone warned me about when I was getting books ready for the young adult and even younger, the middle grade audience. Everyone said, oh, you'll have to get past the gatekeepers. So I was already prepared for that. And the gatekeepers being the parents and the librarians, the ones that buy books for their children or that recommend books for their children. And there are wonderful ways to get your books in front of the librarians and the teachers. Of course, there's always doing it individually, contacting schools, which I did a lot when I only had a few books out and I only had a few children and I had more time. I would contact schools individually, offer to come and do an author presentation for a very low price. And what I asked in return was to be able to sell copies of my books. And many of them took me up on that. I was really able to it was a pretty good thing going. And I got busy and stopped doing that. But author visits to schools are a wonderful way to get your foot in the door and meet with those people. And maybe when COVID's over, I'll try and do something like that again. But another really great way is to get your book as professional as possible and make sure you list those credentials wherever your book is for sale, on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, and everywhere. So I got the Lexile measurements done for my books, as well as the guided reading measurements done. And that's listed. You can look it up on their website. You can look it up on Amazon. If you pull up my books, it has it listed on there what Lexile measurement it is, so that parents and librarians immediately know what reading level these books are at. Now, I haven't done that for all of my books, only for the middle grade books, because it does cost money per book. But for my middle grade books, I find that to be a very important professional measurement that librarians pay attention to. And another thing is to go to conventions that are specifically for secondary education leaders and librarians. These are wonderful because they are the most happy people in the world when it comes to books. And so when I go to a librarian convention, they are so excited to talk to me. They are so excited to learn about my books. And it's helpful if you have ready with you, can't think of what it's called, but there's like what's it called? I can't remember. But if you have
a sell
two sheets of paper that talk about your book, well, not quite, but yes, one of those is good too. But something the teachers can take with them and use your book in the classroom, where it's got like the topic and reading questions that they can go through while they're reading the book, and then questions to go through after they've read the book. And if you can present that to the teachers and the librarians, along with the sell sheet about your book, I've found those to be some of the greatest places to get the gatekeepers familiar with my book. Now, with that in mind, I had those ideas before I even published anything. And I published several books in the young adult genre that they did okay. They did fine. One of them was through a traditional publisher, and it sold a few books. It didn't really take off or anything. So then I started self-publishing, and I sold a few more. And then I started the Cassandra Jones series, which is middle grade. And everyone said middle grade's even harder than young adult. You're going to have a harder time. And I said, that's okay. This is a love series. It's a series I'm in love with, and I don't care if it doesn't sell that well. Well, I don't know what happened. I hit it just right, whether it was the cover, whether it was the keywords, whether it was just the right hour and the right year. But that series took off on Amazon before I did anything with it. And because of that, because the series started to generate reviews and started to get good sales, it then made it a lot easier for me to approach those gatekeepers and say, well, this series has sold this many copies. This series has these reviews from parents. And people who buy on Amazon aren't usually those librarians. They're the parents. So then the word of mouth was spreading by parents instead of just librarians. And so that one, I just got lucky. And you never know when something is going to happen like that, where you get lucky. I continue to ride the laurels of that series because that's what keeps me floating. But I do write other series, and I do implement these other gatekeeper tactics that enable it to sell. But you really do get lucky sometimes with the right cover and the right keywords and the right topic at the right time. And those books just take off for you, no matter what the genre is, no matter how many gatekeepers and barriers are in your way, something can still take off.
That's great. Do you think that it's possible that the readers or parents or librarians who are familiar with your other work might have helped contribute to the success of your middle grade work?
It's possible. I really don't know. I would like to think so, that when they see a new book come out for me, that they then tell their patrons and tell their children, hey, look, there's this, an Amazon and a Draft to Digital and iBooks. They all have a similar program where if one person buys your book, then they will send them a notice when you have another book come out. So I hope that I continue to retain readers and grow my readership, and that Amazon and the other book distributors are helping me out that way.
Well, thank you. So going into our next question, Russell kind of touched on this a little bit already. So you know your target audience, you have found your target audience, you know where they are and how to put your book in front of them. How do you engage with them beyond just the book? How are you communicating with your audience, and what kind of content are you offering or presenting or giving to your audience? We can start with Russell. You talked about your blog. What else do you do?
Well, I've done a lot of public speaking and presentations. I did a class for Ollie, if you're familiar with that, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. It's affiliated with the university. And most of the people who are members of Ollie and attend those type of seminars and workshops are older folks. And a lot of them are retired and they're thinking, well, maybe I want to write something. And so I did a class for them on humor writing, and then also I touched on story structure because I think that's a fascinating topic there, and I think it's the bare bones of, it's kind of like the fish diagram, if you remember the fishbone diagram of how to write a story, and it's I was writing that way before I ever discovered the structure, and then that's kind of surprised me. Wow, I'm doing it right accidentally. But anyway, that's one way that I touch base with them. I also like to go to events like they had a birthday thing once a month, and they would invite an author. Again, that was with Ollie. And that gave you a chance to speak in front of like 15 or 20 people, which is not really a big crowd, but you'd be amazed how many books you could sell there. And then people buy books sometimes for gifts. So that's that. Going to other public events, community barbecues, whatever. There's a lot of places that you can get in front of people that are your target audience, and you never know who might buy a book or even two, as far as that goes. And so that's just one of the ways I do it. And then, I'm doing some online stuff now and then too. That's another way to reach out to them. I read for what was that radio show in Little Rock? Tales from the South. Are you guys familiar with that? I read on there 3 times, and it was broadcast around the world in 88 countries. And you didn't really get to do a whole lot of selling on there, but you got to read your story out loud, and people got to watch you on YouTube. And it was amazing how many hits I had on some of those humor stories. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a bit of overlap, with what you said, talking about doing those classes about kind of helping others learn how to write. And it's kind of like finding that common ground with other writers. And, a lot of, writers read. We write books and we also read books. So it's funny that, writers can also be your audience in a way.
Yeah, but it's like selling refrigerators to Eskimos.
Yeah.
It's a difficult market there. because a lot of them are so busy writing their own books they don't have time to read
Yeah,
yours. But
that's true.
it's still your tribe, and it's fun, and occasionally you do sell some books at those events. Now, if you're a speaker at a conference, generally you sell quite a few.
Just to kind of piggyback off of what you said about, the difference in like what people are writing and whether or not they actually read what you write. I have lots of writer friends, and some of their work I have read, and some of it I have bought and still haven't read. And and I mean, and it's not a small number because I know a lot of writers. But
Me too.
it's like I may not have read their book yet, but I know what it's about. I can recommend it to other people who might be interested in it. And I did buy it. So even if I haven't read and reviewed it, I did support my friend. So I feel like it's a win. I guess, Adriel, this is kind of a weird question for you. Trying to think I guess, what how would you advise someone to do this? Like, how would you advise people to engage with their target audience?
So there's lots of different ways, and some of them are actually genre dependent. Tamara, I have a children's writer who she actually goes into the schools once a year and teaches a class on how to write in an elementary school, and together the kids all write a book that she, or they give her ideas. They're like, and then she writes the actual book, but then she goes back later in the school at the end of the school year and they all get their own copy with their name in it and everything. But she normally has something that goes with it. So like this last year, it was called The Secret Stone, and they all got like a 3D sculpture of the stone that they all wrote the book about, right? So there's always something tangible that the kids in that school get. But then if you happen to read her books from elsewhere, you could also order the stone if you wanted. So that's like one really cool way to connect with some kids, especially in your local school. But I have lots of authors, and but almost everybody has either a Facebook group or an ARC group in their newsletter or something, some group of super fans that they know really well, and they do special stuff just for them. Sure, in your newsletter, you send out the cover before the book is published, getting people excited, but maybe your ARC group or your special group of followers on Facebook, they get to vote on which cover you even choose long before the book's ever written, so they get to do special stuff. They get special things. They get input into your creative process so that they feel more special, and therefore as they become super fans, they want to go sell your books and your work to everybody else. They're really excited when your book comes out because they've been anticipating it for 6 months, and now I'm going to tell everybody that your book's ready. So that's one way, but like you have to balance that with good marketing generally, with also special exclusive stuff for those super fans that are going to go sell you. Other things is, I know a mystery author whose series is set in a bar, and so he sends out bar coasters that after you've read the first book, you can apply to get your free bar coaster, and he sends it to you, and then the new ones come out for sale whenever he has got a new book that's got applies to that specific book. But whatever your genre is, if there's something specific in your book that can be made into an item to sell, well, that's really awesome. And people, if they really love your work, they're going to go buy it. Or, so those are the two main things: is having something special for those super fans, but then also having something that people that aren't quite ready to sell your work yet, but really like your work, that they want to invest in, a special pen or t-shirt or whatever.
I think that's a really good point, like a thing to bring up, like swag. People love stuff, and they love getting stuff that represents things that they love, and it's that's a really cool point that I hadn't really thought about. The whole idea of that children's author, you know, having that special item like that secret stone or whatever it was to give to the students who helped her with that book. I think that's fantastic. And it's like it's something that's something to like reward those fans, you know, those readers for being involved. And it's like it almost kind of creates this, I don't like, sense of loyalty or, you know, friendship or something, you know, good positive feelings that make them want to then, you know, support or help that author in the future. And so I think that that's a really cool thing that I hadn't really thought about. So thank you for adding that, because I now know what one of my marketing plans for my next book is going to be. So, Tamara, what about you? So you talked about doing the school visits. What other ways are you able to engage with your young adult and middle grade readers, and what kind of content do you present?
Well, it's definitely a lot harder with them being younger. Most of them don't have email accounts, so their parents will frequently sign up for my newsletter. But the content I'm putting out in the newsletter is kind of a mix between, am I talking to the child or am I talking to the parent? Because there are a number of children who will sign up for my newsletter. The funny thing is that sometimes their parents will email me and be like, hey, stop talking to my kid. And I'm like, sorry, watch what your kid signs up for. But no, I can't say that. So I have to be careful what I say and what I do, and make sure that if a underage person starts talking to me, because they frequently do, they'll start emailing me or start engaging with me, I have to say, now make sure your mom's okay with you talking to me. And that does frequently happen. And I had one sweet little girl from the United Kingdom who was talking to me, and she wanted to send me a letter. And I said, now you need to go ask your mom. And she came back and said, my mom says I can't. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. But there was another girl in Colorado and New Mexico who had read one of my books, and she'd found an error in it. And she emailed me, and she was quite concerned about this typo. And I said, you know what? I'm going to fix the book. And if your mom will allow it, I'd like to send you the next book, and you can check it for typos for me. And she was so excited, like over the moon excited. And she asked her mom, and her mom said yes. So I sent her the next book so she could check it for typos for me. And it creates that kind of connection where they feel like they're now involved in this process. And of course, I can't always get the younger kids to be involved like that, though I would love it. I would love it if I had 100 12-year-old beta readers to go through my work for me. It would be fantastic. I do have Facebook groups, but again, it is more of the parents that are on there interacting with me. I do have something that I want to get started in the future, and I kind of got this idea because of COVID, because I'm not able to interact with people on a face-to-face basis the way I've always been able to do. This spring was very quiet for me as opposed to previous times where I've been at conventions or conferences and interacting with people. And my children and I have become very excited about these mail order boxes we receive, where we open the box and we get to unveil things. So I've decided for those super fans, the people who follow me on Instagram and are on my Facebook page and are in my newsletter, I'm going to start to give out one box for each new release that has not just the book, but also author swag and cool stuff that has to do with the book. And just one person will get to receive that. And I'm hoping that will generate that kind of connection and excitement, and that they'll post it on social media, and I'll get more people interested in the books. So those are the ways I've come up with to interact with my fans. And some of them work, and some of them I hope will work better in the future.
That's really interesting. Like talking about that whole balance between, you know, parents and actual readers. It seems like it would be a tricky thing to have to handle. And like talking about, you know, getting parental permission for kids to actually engage with you as an author. It's not something I really would have thought about, you know.
And I don't always think of it either. I have to remember, I have to put myself in the shoes of a parent instead of always in the shoes of an author. Because as an author, I'm just super excited that a 10-year-old is emailing me and they're excited about my book. And then I think about, okay, put your mom hat on. How would I feel if my daughter was emailing some person I don't know and talking about sending letters to them. I'm like, okay, so got to get the parents in here and got to get permission for things before we just go all on out with it.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and it's a really good thing to bring up because I'm sure it's something a lot of people don't actually think about. That's really interesting. So moving on to kind of some more advice type things. For those of you who kind of engage with people online, Russell, you have your blog. Like, what are your best tips for reaching people online specifically? So whether it's on a blog, website, newsletter, or social media, what's your advice for reaching those people?
Well, my advice is reciprocate. That's what I do with my blog. I like to also visit other people's blogs, read their stories, leave comments. And, if you leave really clever, funny comments that are just super interesting, people are going to look you up and say, wow, I really like what this person is thinking and what this person is saying. And it's so hard to take serious advice from a guy wearing a red nose. But that is one way that you can reach people, I think, online. It's another thing is, even the words that you use in your blog, the keywords down at the bottom. If somebody's Googling something and you put a word in there that brings them back to you, maybe that word is super chicken or whatever it is, to a story that you've written. That's a way to draw people in. I kind of struggle with that a little bit, and I think my online presence could use a little help. So I may reach out to Adriel and after this meeting and see about picking up some more tips from her. But I like those opportunities, and I'm also a member of LinkedIn, and I'm sure several of you probably are too. It's amazing my blog posts there, and I go there, and sometimes I have more readers on LinkedIn than I do on my blog, which I find fascinating. And I can copy it onto Facebook, and maybe half a dozen people read it there. So it's out there. I'm putting it out there and trying to connect with more people and looking for new ways to connect.
I think that's a really good point about visiting other people's blogs and commenting on other people's posts and things like that, because you do get that kind of back and forth. And, it's, I don't know, it's again, like fostering that sense of community and friendship and things like that. And I think that's a really good way of going about it. And I love that you bring it up, because I used to be a huge blogger back, 10 years ago. And that was, how I did stuff is I was following all these blogs and commenting on everybody's stuff. They come and comment on mine. I'd do interviews and all that kind of stuff. And it was fantastic. And then I had a kid and didn't have time anymore. So no, I think it's great that, you're able to do that and have people come to figure out, find you and see the stuff that you're doing because of the engagement that you go out and do on other people's content. I think that's great. So, Adriel, what tips do you have for Russell?
Well, you just said the right word, the engagement on your posts. And so I want to actually go back to something that Russell said much earlier, and that was he always ended with a question. So if you have a real eye-catching image that makes people actually slow down when they're scrolling through their feed, and then it is an interesting post, whatever, that's relevant to you as a person, you as an author, your book content, whatever, and then you follow that up with a question, then you're going to get a lot more engagement just because you asked the question than you would if you hadn't. So no matter, and that's across all platforms. if you're on Twitter versus if you're on Facebook versus if you're on Google Plus that doesn't exist anymore, all of those, it still counts. So the more you ask questions, and then the key to that even then is then to follow up when they answer and to reply to their comments and engage in that conversation. Once you've got that engagement, that helps a lot. So, but then also another key thing is pick which platform you like best and put the majority of your focus there. Like if you really enjoy Twitter, then you're going to do the majority of your actions on there. But if you really enjoy Instagram, then 90% of your social media efforts should be toward Instagram. And the same with whatever network you choose, whether it's LinkedIn or, Pinterest. So whichever one you enjoy being on the most, then focus your energy there. You can post over on the other social media network, but make sure you focus really on that one, because that's where you're going to build the biggest audience that you relate to, because you just plain want to hang out on that social media more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I remember early on, like in my career, I tried to be everywhere equally. And so it was like, I don't know if Instagram existed at that point. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I was on Twitter, I was on Tumblr, I was on Google Plus and Facebook, and I don't know, whatever other social medias that have risen and fallen in the last, 10 years. I was trying to be everywhere all at once, and I got totally burned out. And it was just like, because I felt like I was doing so much work and not making any like progress or gaining any traction anywhere. And it's because I wasn't focusing on one place. And I feel like once I did, and like a Google Plus, for being a specific one, I loved Google Plus when we had it, and I was so sad whenever they got rid of it, because it was such a fantastic community. And I really grew my audience and even my group of writing friends through that social media. And I think, like I said, is picking the one that you enjoy, because if you don't enjoy it, I feel like that comes across. It can come across. Don't particularly like Facebook. So I don't really post there. I'll often just kind of, if I have a link, an external link to somewhere, I'll share it there. But I don't really post like daily or multiple times a day like a lot of authors do. And that's fine. A lot of authors love Facebook and it's great for them. I don't like it, and that's fine too. I think it's fine. But then like I love Twitter. I'm not on Twitter right now because I'm taking a news hiatus from everything. And but when I am on Twitter, I love being there. I love the people I talk to, and I feel like that enthusiasm and like genuine enthusiasm comes across, and people pick up on that. And so I think it's a really good thing that you brought up, choose the one you like the most and work on building up your audience there, because you can always cross post to other social media platforms. It's super easy. So I'm glad you brought that up. And sorry I rambled a little bit. So Tamara, what about you? What would be your best tips for reaching your audience online?
So I don't really have anything more insightful than what everyone has said. I really like how Adriel and you both emphasized picking one thing instead of spreading yourself super thin. And you can't do it all, not if you want to be an author at the same time. So you pick a few things, one or two. So for me, it's my newsletter and Instagram, and those are what I primarily market on. And then I do have some Facebook groups. I don't give them as much attention as maybe I should, but I don't know if should is even the right word, because I feel like I'm doing enough social media wise that when I do give them attention, it's more like a pat on the back, not something I needed to do. And I think it's important to be consistent with the one you do choose. Like before, I was really good at my newsletter. I only sent it out maybe twice a year. So of course, by the time someone received a newsletter from me, they're going, who is this? So I try to be really consistent with that. I want to keep myself on the forefront of people's minds. I want them to remember who I am because they just heard from me a few days ago when they get an email from me. And the same thing with Instagram. I was really kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is for. It took me a while to figure out an author platform and to figure out to follow people, to get the reciprocation of people following me. But it just kind of snowballs. When you do follow one person, it's like all of a sudden 5 people come over to see who you are. And so you start to get it going and growing. And so it's important to pick 1 or 2 and really focus on those instead of spreading yourself super thin.
Thank you for your additional advice. But no, I think I think it's interesting too that you focus a lot on your newsletter, because I've read or heard from lots of people that your newsletter is like your primary marketing tool, because you own it. Like on Twitter or Facebook or even Instagram, it's like somebody else owns that platform and you are just using it. Whereas like a newsletter, it's like it is yours and you have full control over it, and it's more permanent in a way than a social media stream is. So I like that you brought up that you using your newsletter. I'm still working on doing mine. I got up to doing mine monthly, and I'm very proud of myself. So on the flip side, what are your best tips for in-person events? I know we're not really doing any of those right now, but when, things get back to normal and we can do readings and signings and school visits and those kinds of things, what are your best tips for engaging with your audience in person? We can start with Russell.
Well, again, I love speaking in front of people, and I like going to schools and talking. I was a guest reader for one of my granddaughter's classes last year, and I read the ins and outs of belly button lint farming, and that's an educational little piece about how you can grow a money crop in your navel. But it seemed to go over pretty well with the kids. But I also enjoy a lot. We have a lot of community events. I live in a rural area, and the fire department has a big event every year. And I also play music with some people. So go down there and we play a little music, and I put up a stand and sell a few books. The same thing when we have a crawfish boil at church, other things like that. But I haven't done an Ollie class this year, and I think they're doing those online as well. But I'd love to do one of those on emotional intelligence. That's another subject that I can teach a class on, which I think is a fascinating thing. So, but I really like the interaction with people. Libraries is wonderful. I love doing a presentation at Fayetteville Public Library. I've not done anything at any of the other local ones yet, but when things open back up, that's an activity I'd like to get into.
Do you have like anything that you would consider to be something that you do to make those kind of in-person experiences like successful? Like, I'm not sure how you would define that, but how do you walk away from one of those in-person events feeling like you did a good job, I guess?
Well, it's when you feel that connection with the audience, when you can share that shared experience, that common thing that you both can relate to. That's where you touch base with people, and I think when you have to be likable. Tamara is extremely likable. I've seen her numerous times at conferences. She is a very effervescent speaker, and that really helps. And I know when she spoke at Al, I think she sold a whole bunch of books there, and a lot of people started following her. So that was a way that she built her audience. And I hope to do some of the same things with my personal appearances. And I'm also a member of several other things. I'm in a historical group, and I plan to do a nonfiction book later on. And by meeting those people now, historical preservation people, meeting people at museums, that'll open up a door for that. And then, once I get in that door, maybe I'll find that they like humor as well.
That's a really good outlook. I like that. Because you never know, right?
That's right.
So, Adriel, how would you advise authors to make the most out of in-person events like readings or signings or even public speaking?
So what not everybody knows is that I come from a theater family. I actually grew up in theaters. I have done a lot of presentations, and now a lot of the skills that I learned there, I actually transfer to speaking at conferences. And um, when I work with an author at an author conference, just selling their books to the public. So the first thing is smile, like really, truly, and make sure it is actually in your eyes too, not just your mouth. And a good way, but you can't smile if you're exhausted or in pain or something like that. So you need to make sure you've been eating well and sleeping well. And if you start the day and you just know you're going to have a headache, make sure you take that bottle of Tylenol with you. Have your coffee, or for me it's Spark, whatever it is. But make sure that when you get there, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you've got to turn on that presentation mind, which granted is a learned skill. And the more you do it and the more you watch others that are really good at it do it, the better you can get. But then with that, once you're there and once you're smiling, pulling people in to your booth, if you're in a large room full of authors selling, is key. And a good way to do that is with humor. I have one author who always greets people with, "Why, you look like a fine individual of wonderful taste," and people laugh. And then he's like, "Come on in, let me show you what I've got," But he breaks the ice so that they actually want to stop and slow down and come into his booth versus glance at his banner and then walk by. But so make sure you smile. Make sure you have something that you can use, whatever kind of patter it is, to bring them into your booth, or when you're giving a presentation, to break the ice and say, "Hey, this is what I am now. Everybody relax and actually listen to what I have to say," though you don't say those words. And being prepared for that mentally and physically helps a ton. But then on top of that, I spent a lot of time with James Artemis Owen. He is a graphic designer and an author who draws the most amazing dragons, and he gives really incredible presentations at conferences for authors on how to succeed as an author. And one of the most awesome things about James is that when you walk away from an encounter with him, whether it's at a booth or he was in front of the stage talking to 300 people, or we sat together and had dinner, you walk away feeling like he saw you personally and that he valued you and that he believes in you. And that's something that comes from inside James, and that's part of his personality. But again, that's a learned skill. And when you're around people who make everyone around them feel valuable, you can see over time, if you're really watching for it, what they do and how they do that. And a lot of that has to do with eye contact. A lot of it has to do with tuning everybody out for a second and really focusing on you, really listening and responding appropriately to what someone's saying. But when you can learn that skill of how to make people feel valued and that you cared about them, then they're going to leave that encounter and they're going to go sell 1 million books for you because they felt like you knew them.
I think that's all very good advice. So, Tamara, what about you? It seems like you do a lot of in-person stuff when the world is normal. And what advice do you have for engaging in those in-person events?
Yeah, this is actually a really exciting topic for me. So I know we're just about out of time, so I will limit my enthusiasm. But I love some of the things that Adriel said. She talked about her background with acting, because I'm actually an extreme introvert. I'm really shy around people. I've actually really loved having to do isolation and not needing to do social events. But Russell, thank you for saying I'm so effervescent, because when I go to conferences and I'm presenting, I totally put on a different persona. It is me becoming a different person, and I actually really love it. I love those moments when I'm presenting and I'm talking about something that I enjoy so much, because I'm passionate about my craft. I'm passionate about what I do, but I'm very shy. And so without the excuse of going to a conference and presenting where someone's saying, please tell us everything about what you do, I probably wouldn't speak up at all. But suddenly I'm giving license to just talk about it. And so it's a great opportunity for me to step out of my shell and not be nervous, because I do know what I'm talking about and I do love what I'm talking about. So I think we just need to own what we do and be proud of it and be excited about it. And whatever shyness or fear we have, just push it aside. That's not what this is about right now. So when I'm presenting, that's what I do. I'm a totally different person at conferences than I am in my own backyard. And then the other thing is with live events, I think it's very important to engage with people. Like Adriel talked about, the one author that has kind of an icebreaker. If you stand there, or sit is even worse, if you're sitting behind your table just watching people go by, they're just going to walk right on by. I'm never ever sitting at an event. I might have a chair. Sometimes I don't even bring it. I'm on my feet the entire time. Usually I'm on the opposite side of my table. I am greeting people as they walk by, handing them a bookmark or asking if they've read my books. I make sure to tell them I'm a local author. I wrote these because I have so many books. People think I'm a reteller, like Usborne Books or something. And people become much more interested when they find out, oh, you wrote these books. And so it's a great way to engage people. Even if they don't buy a book, they're interested in who I am and they're congratulatory. And also, one of the things I learned is you want to have a beautiful display. You want to draw the eye to you. So a banner, I have a banner. It's beautiful. I love my banner. It's a stand-up banner, has my books on it and catchy little slogans and a few reviews for people. But I also set up my display to look like something that would draw children in. So I've got these fake little campfires and little tiny camp tents I set up, and I have my books standing up so that they're on display and they draw the eye in. So people want to come over and see what it is. Some people, as soon as they realize it's books, they walk away. But other people are interested. They want to learn more about it. So those are the things I've kind of learned, is that not only do I have to be excited, but I have to get people to come and see what I'm excited about.
Good point.
Yeah, I think, that's really, really good points. Quick question for Adriel. What was the name of the author that draws dragons and makes people feel valuable? It's a viewer question. What was the name of that author?
James Artemis Owen.
James Artemis Owen. Okay. We'll make sure we add that to the description so that people can get that later. I do want to follow up kind of on what both Adriel and Tamara talked about. This idea of, when you're at an event, you can become somebody else, or even more, you become yourself, just more on. And it's kind of like how I refer to it, because when I first started out with author events, I was the person sitting behind my chair, like way back, and not talking to anybody, and just super shy and afraid, and I just didn't really know what to do. And
I think I came and saw you that first time.
But yeah, I mean, it was because it's a really daunting thing being in a place, like even like at a Barnes and Noble, right? It's like something, lots of baby authors dream about, being sitting at a Barnes and Noble and doing a book signing. And, you get there and you're terrified because you'd have no idea what you're supposed to be doing. And it was funny because I did that a few times and I didn't do very well selling books. And then I had this dual signing with someone, and this other author was so engaging and so just like, outgoing and smiling and talking to every single person that walked through the door, like handing them stuff. And I was just like, oh, that's how it's done. And so after that point, I was like, okay, we're going to be extroverted Brooke, and we're going to smile and talk to everyone that walks through the door and just be super, friendly and everything like that. And it totally changed the way that my events went. I went from selling, 1 or 2 books at an event to selling 30. And like, it was that much of a difference. And going to like conventions, I go to a lot of conventions when they're happening. And one of the tricks that I like to do, because I am a shy person, I'm an introverted person. I don't want to say I don't like people. I don't like interacting with people. I love people. You're all great. But one of the things is I like to imagine everyone is my friend. Like, that they could just, come hang out at my house and we play board games, and that's just how I treat everybody. It's like, oh, you're just part of my friend group. And it's so much easier to just pretend that, because you skip all the awkwardness of meeting a new person. And it's just like, oh yeah, totally. I'm going to totally just sit here and listen to you and feel super, involved in what you're saying because you're my friend. And, I feel like it creates those, more, it starts from like a fake place in a way, but I feel like you end up showing more of your genuine self through those conversations, and you actually end up bypassing a lot of the stranger to friendship, barriers. And so it's like you talking about that other author who making people feel valuable. And I feel like, that's definitely one way that you could do it, is like, this person isn't just some random stranger. They came and talked to me. They are now my friend. And so I don't know how applicable that is for most people, but I found that it really works for me. So I thought I'd kind of add that on to what you guys were saying.
One other thing I just realized is I'm an extrovert, but I still have my on personality that's effervescent and my not as effervescent personality. So when I go to conferences, as much as possible, if I can afford it, I room alone, because all day long I'm in the conference with the people, talking to people I am on, and then I need to go to my room and turn off and shut down for the night. So, and that's even as an extrovert, I still need that recovery time every night if I'm going to get up and do it again the next morning, especially once the conference is, if it's 5 or 7 days long, then like by the end of it, you've made all those relationships, but you still need to be able to, have a pleasant conversation, which means you need to be able to shut down and recuperate every night.
Yeah, I think that's another really good point. It's really easy to say yes to everything, especially at conferences. And you're like, sure, I can totally do 8 back-to-back panels and not need to eat. I can do that, and that's not true. You need to make time for yourself, whether it's at the end of the day or, only schedule yourself for a little bit at a time so that you have that time to recover because, even extroverted people need that time. So I'm glad you said that. So one last quick question. I know we're a little bit over an hour, so if you guys don't mind humoring me, I would like to know, what is the best experience you have ever had while engaging with a reader? Let's start with Russell.
The best experience I ever had engaging with a reader was a gentleman who had bought my book, and he was going to the doctor's office. And so he's out there in the waiting room for a while, and I'm not sure if he was the patient or another family member was, but he said, I knew I was going to be out there for a while, so I took your book. And he said, I sat there and I started reading, and I was laughing out loud, and he said, I looked around the room, and there are like 10 other people just staring at me like I'm crazy or something. So he said, I closed the book and laid it down. And he said, I sat there for a couple minutes, and then I picked the book back up and I started reading. And he said, I started laughing again. And I thought that was just so great. That was the nicest compliment that I ever got.
That's really great. And I don't know, Adriel, if you have any anecdotes that you could add to that.
I run a lot of ARC teams for authors, so I'm the one that emails the book out to the readers, gives them the links for where they need to leave reviews, tells them what's going on, gives them promo info if they do that sort of stuff. And because of that, I see patterns. A lot of my authors, even those that write in different genres, have some cross fandoms. And because there are some readers who just read everything, right? So I noticed, I got an email from one of the readers of a particular author, and she said, I think I'm going to have to miss the next book because I've got surgery coming up. And I said, hold on a second. And I went and I looked her up, and she was in 6 of my authors' ARC teams. So I was able to email all of those authors and say, hey, look, this member of your ARC or beta team, even she was an alpha reader for one of them, was like, she's got a surgery coming up. Do you all want to do something special for her? And so we were able to put together a whole package and send it to her for her recovery. And it was special. Yes, it was their books, but it was also specialized stuff just for her recovery. And because of that, now, like, she and I are really good friends now, and she tells people, I like those authors, but I really love their assistant, and that was something cool I got to do just because I worked for so many different authors that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And like, she and I still talk every day now, so I really enjoy that.
That's really great. I love that. Like, that's just such an amazing thing to have done. So, Tamara, what about you? What is the best experience you ever had with a reader?
Well, I don't know about the best. I think I would require a little bit more time to figure that one out. But I remember something that was memorable was one time I was doing an event in Gravette. It was outside. It was a fair. And a woman came up with her little girl. And she said to her daughter, she's like, oh, it's the Cassandra Jones series. And they're looking at it. And the woman looks at me and she goes, wait, you're the author? And I'm like, yeah, I wrote the books. And she's like, we just moved here, and I bought these for my daughter before we moved to Arkansas because it was about a little girl moving to Arkansas, and she loves your books. So it was super exciting. It's a total like fan moment where they wanted to take my picture and they posted on Instagram, and I felt really famous and cool. But it was just fun to be like, there are people out there who have read my books, and then they meet me and they think I'm cool. So that's the only thing I can think of at the moment that's been a memorable fan moment. I don't know about anything that's been life-changing for me or them. I get the emails from time to time where they say my book touched their life and made them want to be a better person, whatever. But that's the one that really stuck out to me, is someone from a different state read my book, and then they met me, and it was cool.
That's awesome. I love that. I think it's great too that like she bought those books for her daughter because they were moving to Arkansas and the character moves to Arkansas. That's just great. To add my own experience, I've had a few that I think of all the time because they really just like made me feel like I am an author and like people have read my books, and it's those really good feelings. But there was this one signing I did at Barnes & Noble where I think it was just after my 3rd book came out. This teenage girl came up with her best friend, and she picked up the new book, and she's like, I've been waiting for this book. And then she asked me for me to sign the new book, and then she pulled out this like totally like weather beaten copy of my first book. It was like the spine was totally broken, like the gloss was coming off, there was dog-eared pages, and like just totally frayed, and like had been loved to death. And she said that she had read it like 3 times, and she gave it to her best friend to read and just loved it so much. And like that was such a huge moment for me. And I think especially coming from a teenage girl, that was my target audience, was like, this is who I was writing for. And so to have like essentially the embodiment of who I was writing the book for come to me and tell me how much they love my book and showed me how much they love my book, that was such a just great experience for me. And it like made everything worth it.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, most authors probably have some kind of story like that. And I really wanted to get you guys's, you know, different experiences with readers, because it is such a special thing, I feel like. But so that was the last question I had for you guys. I want to thank you again for agreeing to be with us for this hour and 15 minutes. So before we sign off, if you guys would once again tell us about your work, maybe your website, where to find you online. Russell, if you go first.
Okay. My website is russellgayer.com. It's a WordPress site. It's also called What's So Funny. And so come visit, read, comment, and I'll comment right back to you. We'll have a good time. Thank you for having me here.
Adriel, where can people find you?
You can find me at adrielwiggins.com. That's ADRIELWIGGINS.com. Come hang out, chat with me, but I'm not taking any clients right now. So I'm just disclaimer. But yeah, I love to always make friends and chat.
Tamara?
Same, I have the website, tamarahartheiner.com. I don't really hang out there much, but you can find more information about me and my books. I'm also on Instagram, Tamara Heiner, and you can find me on Facebook, author Tamara Heiner.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us, and thank you for our viewers for watching and joining in. This workshop is produced by Ozark Book Authority, a local nonprofit with the mission to improve literacy in Northwest Arkansas. You can donate to our organization at any time at www.ozarkbookauthority.com/donate to help fund more events like this one. This is our last live video for the workshop, but we do plan to move forward with our Time to Write program once a month, writing conversations with local authors. So be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you can watch those as we do them. We have one more video scheduled to come up this week with Tamara is going to be doing a video for us. But in the meantime, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us for our very first Ozark Writers Workshop. This is our first year doing this, and I think it's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm just so happy of everyone being involved. But we hope we found our videos and panels to be fun and informative, and that you've learned something for writing your own stories. So until next time, happy writing. And thank you guys for doing this for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.